Hello, and welcome to Marathon Swim Stories, where we explore the human side of the superhuman feats of endurance swimmers and those who support them. I'm marathon swimmer and coach Shannon Keegan. Today, I had the distinct pleasure of chatting with Stephen Munatones. Open Waterpedia, one of the many open water resources that Steve has created, lists him as a water polo player and open water swimmer. But a quick search on the Marathon Swimmers Federation Project Long Swims database exposes a marathon swimming history on the International Pro Tour. In our conversation today, Steve walks us through his experience growing up swimming last in the fast lane behind national team and Olympic pool swimmers before discovering his talent for the open water that landed him on the international stage representing the United States of America for long-distance marathon swimming, only to come home and find out that open water swimming does not get coverage in traditional swimming periodicals. This was the late 70s, you guys. There was no internet. Fortunately, Steve is not afraid to put his pen to paper and reach out to, well, anyone. First and foremost, his Swimming World magazine. Over time, he creates a compendium of open water swim knowledge by writing letters to people he meets on the international swim circuit, cataloging open water swim events, best practices, you name it. Steve humbly states that he prefers to highlight your achievements rather than discuss his own, but his story is one that you don't want to miss. Enjoy. I always open it up really broadly. I usually just say, "Hey, Steve, what's your story?"
My story is one of adventure and interest. Um, when I was a little kid, and the young people don't know this, but people my age and like people like Chris understand this. Is we actually read encyclopedias, and I always remember going over my grandfather's house and on opening up his big set of beautiful encyclopedias. And I literally started at the letter A, and every time I'd go over, I'd read some more. And it really opened me up at a very young age to the wonders of the world and the universe. And I used to read about, everything from, I don't know, Mozambique to Manhattan. And I was a kid in Southern California, and this world of the written world of encyclopedia really opened my eyes. So I wanted to go out, and I had to figure out a way. How is it going to travel around the world? Living in Southern California, my parents took me at a very young age to Santa Monica Beach, and that's where I learned how to swim. And as I proceeded, I was very fortunate to be in teams where there were a lot of Olympic swimmers and very talented swimmers. I was always in lane one, but at the end of the group. So I knew where all these Olympians were when I was a teenager, and they would travel to Europe, and they would travel to Asia, and they would travel to South America. And I thought, God, that'd be so cool. They get to go to all these places for free, and they get to wear these nice USA uniforms and stuff. And I was not that fast, so I wasn't able to compete in the pool, but I figured out a way that, hey, there's open water. And that was in the 70s with Lynn Cox and Penny Dean and John York and others. They were really opening up my eyes to what was possible and how a swimmer could travel the world through the means of open water swimming. And so that was my impetus on how I got into this world of open water swimming.
When did you start? When did you start competing in open water? Did you jump right into
Uh,
marathons, or did you do other stuff first?
oh yeah, in Southern California in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was throughout the summer months, there was always a round of pier swim, peer to peer swim every weekend. So I went from San Diego all the way up to Santa Barbara Orange County, LA County. There were so many, I would say 1/2 mile to 3 mile swims. And I did them all. There wasn't a swim that I didn't do. Um, I enjoyed it. As I got older into my teens, I ventured up into Northern California, and so that was my introduction. And we were very fortunate when I was a kid to have. It was called the Seal Beach swim. And Seal Beach swim was often the place where the USA Swimming in its early years, early um, entry into the open water swimming world, that's where they had their national championships. And there was a swim between the Huntington Beach Pier and the Seal Beach Pier. They called it a 10-mile swim. It was probably more like maybe an 8.5 mile swim. But that's where all the locals. I swam at Lakewood Aquatic Club and Beach Swim Club, and that's where all of the many of the swimmers you hear about started. And we just did these swims because we knew it. If you were in lane one and you were a distance swimmer or an IM swimmer or did any of the 200 butterflies, the 200 backstrokers, you were in these events. And that's what I did. And I was 1 year, I don't remember, 1978. 1978, I was 16 years old, and I did my first 10-mile swim, really an 8-mile swim, and I didn't finish. The water was too cold, and I wasn't mentally ready for that. And I ended up getting out voluntarily, swimming to shore, and then walking in my Speedos to the finish. And I call that my walk of shame. And I vowed, I will never do that again. A few years later, they had another national championship along that same course. And this one was the first year that USA Swimming would send a national team to an international competition. So I was a little bit older. I think I was 18, 18 or so, 19. And the carrot at the end of that race was a free trip to England, to Lake Windermere. So
Yeah.
I trained very hard for that, and I was fortunate to win. And Penny Dean, who I had known before, but I had never known intimately, came up to me and explained to me what we were doing. Dale Petronich was there and a variety of the other USA Swimming officials. And they said, this is going to be our first attempt. We put a budget together, a small budget, but we're going to put you on the airplane. We're going to fly you to England. We're going to drive from London up to Lake Windermere, and you're going to represent the United States. And I was like, wow, for all those years training behind the Olympians and the world record holders, NCAA champions, finally I got to wear my own USA Swimming gear. So I thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
Then this is the important part, and this is what brings us from 1978 to the current time. So I go over to England and I win the race, and people who, Alison Streeter was in the race. Lots of people of that era were in that race. And I came back, and at the time, people didn't, obviously the internet wasn't around, and sort of the big publication, the monster publication, is many people in my age group know, was Swimming World magazine.
Yep.
And again, I grew up with all the people who are on covers of Swimming World magazine, and they have feature stories in Swimming World magazine. I said, God, here I just want to race for the United States. I was able to wear a USA thing. I'm going to come back, and I'm finally going to be able to see my name in Swimming World magazine. I didn't care.
Right.
It was a one-liner. That was like I wouldn't say it was my goal. It was the thing that I had looked forward to.
Yeah.
And I remember Penny and I coming back, and then that month like many swimmers, age group swimmers of that era, I got my Swimming World magazine. I opened it up. I knew I wasn't going to be on the cover. I opened it up and I went flipped through it. Nothing was there. I go, wait a second. This is an international competition. This is a championship. There was people from all over the world competing in this. And so I went page by page, and I went page by page. And again, nothing was on. It was called the International Long Distance Swimming Championships. Mm-hmm. Nothing was on about. And I go, Now, at the time, Swimming World magazine was headquartered near LAX in Southern California. Mm-hmm. So as a person did in the 1970s and 80s, I wrote a letter. I literally hand wrote a letter to the editor of Swimming World magazine. And I made a copy of the results. I put them in the letter and I sent it off. And the publisher gave me a call at my parents' home, of course, no cell phones. And he said, "Oh, I didn't know about this race." And then I said, "Yes." And I explained. He goes, "Oh, that sounds so interesting. We've never covered open water swimming. I didn't know this kind of event occurred." And I said, "Yes." I explained the qualification procedures, et cetera, et cetera. He goes, "Why don't you write a story on it?" So I sit there and go, wait a second. I'm writing a story about an event that I participated in. So I wrote it in the third person because I didn't want to say Steve Munatones won the event written by Steve Munatones. Right. Very strange. So I wrote it in the third person, and then he did publish it. I think it was 1 or 2 months later. And then he said, then I wrote back and said, that was pretty fun. I'd never written anything like that before. And I said, and there's a lot of other great things that are happening around the world. And he says, good, why don't you write about them? And so back in the 70s and 80s, I would literally write out a letter. I put it in the snail mail, send it over to whomever, and gradually begin every single year. I did that every single month. I did that with people from around the world, people that I initially met in Lake Windermere, the Dutch, the British, the Czechoslovakians, well, at that time, Yugoslavians, the Germans, et cetera. And they'd answer me 1 or 2 months later with a handwritten letter. And that's how I began a correspondence of swimmers and race directors around the world. And in our sport, as you know, once you become a swimmer, you never really leave the sport. Right. Many of the swimmers then, as they retired, they became escort pilots, they became race organizers, they became coaches. And so this little network that basically began with Penny Dean and Dale Petronich, and then expanded to that community that gathered in Lake Windermere, then became a global community. And I remember in, I think it was the late 80s, I had, again, kids nowadays don't know this, I had graph paper. And on that graph paper, every time I'd learn of a new race, I'd write it down. And in the 1980s, I remember my quote, global list of open water swims had about 190 events on it total. Wow. 190 total. I mean, of course, it included everything from the Lake Windermere swims, some of the swims in the Serpentine and various places in the Mediterranean, but it also included, for example, the Manhattan Island Marathon swim, which was, in its very beginnings. It included the Waikiki rough water swims and a handful of swims in Asia, and that was it. And now I look, now looking at the year 2021, that number certainly exceeds 35,000 events. It's certainly the numbers, there's no way this small community of people who used to communicate literally by snail mail. I have handwritten letters from people, saying, welcome, when the next time you come to, Austria, please visit. And so technology awareness And, I think it is the longevity of open water swimmers that has allowed this sport to continue. I see Chris Rutford here. I mean, I don't know when he began his first Manhattan Island Marathon swim, but he's still with us. If we
Yeah.
consider all of the competitive swimmers who started out, let's say as a 14, 16, or 18-year-old, some of them are into master swimming, but most of them have moved on to life.
Yep.
It seems that the open water swimming world, we sort of all hang on and we
keep coming
grow
back.
as the sport expands literally exponentially.
Yeah.
Long answer to a short question.
No, it was perfect though. I was going to ask about Wowza and how it came to be, so you totally nailed that one. Thank you.
Well, Wowza has another interesting story.
Okay,
So,
before I want to hear Wowza too, but no. So the first letter you wrote.
uh-huh.
How old were you? 20?
I was 19.
So you're 19 when you came back from Windermere. Okay, yeah. And this just started the global correspondence and cataloging of open water swimming. Okay, correct. And then Wowza, take us away.
Yeah. So in 1984 was the first time I had personally heard of a concerted effort to get marathon swimming into the Olympics. Before there were, even when I went to England, and before that, people would talk about just a passing comment. Oh, it would be cool to have marathon swimming in the Olympics. Again, they were just passing comments, but through Penny Dean and Dale Petronich and others, they really put a concerted effort into having marathon swimming in the Olympics. And in 1984, they organized a Catalina Channel crossing. Countries, not so many countries, I think 7 or 8 countries maybe, participated in a Catalina Channel crossing. And the IOC members, FINA members, were actually at the finish that was held at Cabrillo Beach. Cabrillo Beach, for those of you who understand the Catalina Channel, is, gosh, it's probably 3 or 4 miles longer than the shortest distance between Catalina and the Southern California mainland. Okay. But Cabrillo Beach allowed the officials to actually see these swimmers come into shore. Mm-hmm. And from 1984, there was support on the IOC and FINA side to introduce open water swimming into the Olympics. Now, it took many people, many creative people, many passionate people to continue to lobby their own national governing bodies, and then therefore the IOC, mm-hmm. to put open water swimming in the Olympics. But finally, that culminated in 2005, October or November, I forgot when. In 2005, the Olympics, the IOC agreed in first pass to add a 10K marathon swim into the Olympics. So that was great. So we had to prepare that information and give it to the IOC. They passed it on first vote, and marathon swimming was in the Olympics in 2005. Except nobody knew what the definitions were. Certainly nobody knew who the best swimmers were. Mm-hmm. The qualification standards, et cetera, were all this unknown. And I was aware of this. So I had all this correspondence from all these people around the world, and I had always followed the open water swimming around the world. So I sort of knew who were the better swimmers. So same thing like I did with the Swimming World editor and publisher, writing a letter, I started to write stuff like, these are the swimmers to watch. These are the strategies involved. This is what a feeding station is. This is what a pontoon is. This is what a feeding stick is. This is how you make a feeding stick. This is drafting. This is positioning. This is even the definition of a foul, or a foul in open water swimming. What is impeding? What is unsportsmanlike conduct? All of this information had to be formalized and put in the public sector so people could appreciate the sport like we appreciated the sport. And so we had to create the information and the heroes behind it. One thing led to another. I wrote NBC and said, hey, you guys are going to televise this sport. You should consider camera angles and all these different things. And lo and behold, I got a response back from NBC saying, hey, if you know so much about this sport, why don't you help us commentate? I said, great, I'm there.
Perfect.
So, and Wowza was created because, again, it was just me. I needed some kind of structure to appear official. I wasn't representative of FINA. I wasn't a representative of USA Swimming. I was just trying to create some kind of official structure so NBC and the IOC would allow me and others to share who are the heroes and what do they do and how do they train and what do they eat, so the Olympic audience could appreciate what these great athletes did in a 10K swim in a rowing basin in Beijing.
Yeah.
That was the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. But before Wowza, it was like open water source or something, like you were
Yes.
dabbling in some stuff
Yeah.
like to get the message out there. That's fantastic.
Yes.
I was going to close it with thank you for everything you've done for Open Water Swimming, but we'll just slip that in now. I'm sure I'll say it again. Let's get back to your own swimming career though, because you did some amazing swimming yourself. And so you said you kind of pushed distance because you weren't as fast as the other guys in lane one, but you wanted to travel internationally. So what happened after Windermere?
So after Windermere, I realized. I think it was 1978. It was a swim in Chicago where Olympic champion John Kinsella competed in a race. It was called the Pepsi Challenge or something like that. It was actually 1978. I think they had like either a $25,000 or $30,000 prize. It was quite large if you consider it. The value of that much money in 1978. Again, I forgot the exact number, but that exposed me to the professional marathon swimming circuit. And so in college, I swam and played water polo. So I had to figure out a way how I could retain my NCAA eligibility and also compete on the professional circuit. Without going into too many details, I figured out a way. So this exposed me to races. At the time, I knew about, let's say, the Capri Napoli swim in Italy. I knew about the Argentinian swims in South America. I knew about the Egyptian races, but the races that were closest to me and easy for me to get to were the Canadian lake races. So I went from, Windermere to the professional circuit. Again, I was able to meet more people from around the world, get more information from them. And those were fun. I subsequently got a job in Japan, and in Japan, one of the things I wanted to do, because I had not seen a Japanese or many Asians, to be honest, in these professional, in the professional circuit or in the international races, like in Windermere. And so I went there and I figured out 5 different swims that I was able to do. Again, this is in the 80s. So if you think about it economically, Japan had a lot of money at the time. I was able to find very nice sponsorship, and I was able to do a series of 5 swims throughout Japan. They were all very, very interesting. They were all public or televised on prime time in Japan. So, I was always that theme of, adventure and trying to do something that suited my aquatic talents, as opposed to swimming a very fast 200 butterfly. I just, created for myself.
That's awesome. So because you were at Harvard, right? So that's why
Yeah.
the Canadian lakes and stuff
Yes.
were closer. What's your favorite memory from that period of the open water, the pro circuit and things like that?
Um, I think my favorite memory was, and this is usually it, isn't the finish of the races. It was actually the start of the races. It was really cool for me to be sitting there at the start of the race. Everybody's, even if they pretend they're not nervous, there is this sense of heightened awareness. There is this sense of not only are you aware of somebody else who's going to swim across Lake St. John or Lake Memphremagog or around Manhattan Island, but there's this also sense of camaraderie. So I remember when I swam around Manhattan Island. Paul Asmus was there, Shelley Taylor Smith was there, and others were there. And we were all sort of looking at each other. We all, at the time, I remember swimming and we would feed every hour to 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
That was it. And often the first 3 hours, we wouldn't feed at all.
Wow.
So if you imagine, you sleep somewhat restlessly. You'd wake up, you might have a little bit of bite to eat, and then you swim the first 3 hours hard without eating or drinking. And then you only drink around Manhattan Island. I think I probably drank something 5 times.
Oh, wow.
That's it. And was probably this much. And so getting out, we were all very dehydrated. I remember doing a swim in Cabo San Lucas with Philip Rush was there, Claudio Plitt was there, Paul Asmuth was there, and the water was very warm. It was 30 degrees Celsius, so 86, 87 degrees. And when I was racing against Claudio, he and I were roughly the same speed. We were looking at each other. And I told my boat, he told his boat, don't stop unless he stops. And so we're racing with under a cloudless sky. I don't remember the temperature. The water was 86, 87 degrees Fahrenheit. And he and I are literally just melting, but we're so stubborn that we're refusing to stop even an inch. And we were just going back and forth and back and forth. And I remember thinking my mouth was so dry. And I think about it now, it's like, how stupid. I just stop and grab something. That would have been so much better. But at the time it was sort of mano a mano, I'm going to out macho you instead of outsmart you. So the start of the race was really cool because you saw how people were preparing. Did they stretch? How much lanolin, if any, did they put on? I remember Philip Rush, when the water was cold, he would get in without a cap. And it completely blew my mind. I think, how in the world is this guy going to swim, 6, 7, 8, 12 hours without a swim cap? And that kind of stuff was, sort of a gamemanship of the people at the start. So the starts were always really, really interesting to me.
Yeah. I just read about some of them, I guess, in Paul Asmus' book, and it sounded like that was always just quite intense part of the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah.
No favorite memories though? Anyone you're especially proud of? What swim are you especially proud of?
Oh, I mean, the swim that I did in northern Japan, my solo swim, that was very cool. It was cool because there was an intense negotiation between myself and my escort boat and the Japanese Coast Guard. I had known the Japanese Coast Guard and the head guy of Japanese Coast Guard, and nobody had ever swum this particular course before. David Udavin had done the Tsugaru Channel, I think 10 days before I did. But he started at a different point and I started at a particular point. It was rather rocky, etc. But I wanted to start there for various reasons. And there was a negotiation with the Japanese Coast Guard that I had to make it halfway across the channel in 3 hours or I would be pulled. And what happened is I got to the race, and many people don't know that there's a tunnel underneath the Tsugaru Channel,
Oh, wow.
a railway. And I had many meetings with the engineers who actually created that tunnel. And they had about 30 years of tidal information. And it was fascinating to me to meet with these guys and we figured out a way how to do it. But the first about kilometer, the rules were I had to swim by myself. So, and we started at night, or it was getting dark, and I saw my boats out there, and I had to swim. So that first 3 hours, getting across, or the first kilometer was scary. And the first 3 hours, I was quite nervous. But when I got to the midway point in 3 hours, and they signaled to me like, okay, you can continue the rest of the way. That was, I was very happy at that point, because it was a battle bureaucratically, navigationally, operationally, in a foreign country. So that was a really enjoyable experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did it feel finishing that swim? How do you describe that feeling?
It was great. I mean, it was televised. And so, it's one thing to finish a race. It's one thing to finish a channel. And I've been on many channel crossings, as a paddler, a support crew, etc. This was really cool in Japan. I always had a television camera and crew on shore waiting for me to, hand me a mic. And so the swims in Japan were things that I created, and they had things that I wanted to have done. Again, as a kid who didn't get the accolades that my teammates did, and I saw them like, God, it'd be really cool to get interviewed. I thought, wow, I want to do these races where I'm interviewed. And so it's really satisfying for at the end of the race, a TV camera, person would come up to me and stick a mic in my hand or face and say, hey, how was it? And throughout the swims, I'd always be thinking, I have to think of something very clever, very profound to state at the end of these races. And I was never able to do that, but it was still fun otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great that you were able to create that atmosphere at the end for you. I think it was Catherine Breed mentioned in my interview with her how, it's like she'd gone from, college swimming to like doing Lake Tahoe finishing, setting the record, and there's like crickets, It's quite a different finish in a solo marathon swim. How was that transition though? Did you enjoy the transition from like racing to solo?
I prefer racing. It makes the swim easier.
Yeah.
And it really pushes you. I mentioned earlier about racing against Claudio Plitt, or I remember racing against Paul Asmuth down the Hudson. And you just do things in a race that you wouldn't necessarily do in a solo swim. So I remember Paul and I were swimming. I mean, I could touch the seawalls around Manhattan Island. I mean, to be honest, I think that's sort of dangerous. But in a race, we were, he was there. He saw me, obviously. And so we were together and we would just push the envelope. In the solo swims, I didn't have to push the envelope. And because the solo swims I did were always swims or courses that nobody else had done, there was always an element of risk, significant risk. I did a swim in Okinawa where there's many sharks, and I had 4 boats around me and what they call shark divers. And that was really cool. I'd always wanted to swim with sharks. And I was able to find a place where there are plenty of sharks and I could see the sharks. Fortunately, none of them or all of them ignored me. So racing and solo swimming were just 2 different parts of this equation of open water swimming that I had wanted to create for myself. And racing was fun. It challenged me in different ways, but open water solo swims challenged me in other ways. How do I literally create an event out of nothing? How do I create a course that's never been done before and do it safely? What are the issues with what happens when I fail? I mean, I was asking these sponsors to provide a lot of money, and I was always thinking like, there's no option for failure, because once I fail, I won't be able to get another sponsor. So
Right.
there was a lot that I liked about solo swims, especially a pioneering swim that I thought was intellectually interesting.
Yeah, and that probably helped contribute to your book as well.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and the reason why you said you didn't hear many interviews about me is because I find all of you more interesting than me.
I like to say that too, but but we still like to hear about you.
Really, I like doing things in my own life and challenging, but I get my inspiration from following the exploits of everybody. I mean, I remember when I was young, and Doc Councilman did the English Channel at the age of 58, 56 or 58. I don't remember exactly when. And at the time, that was considered so old. You know, you're in your 50s and you're doing a channel swim. I mean, now it's like, if you're in your 40s, you're not even,
You're not young. Yeah. You're too young.
But, back then, even if you were old, in my book, it was just so inspirational. And I love surrounding myself by these inspirational people, and always inspirational people, their universe or their network also has other inspirational people. So it doesn't matter whether I'm in Tel Aviv or Tokyo, Milwaukee or Monterey. I'm always interested in not only what the swimmers do in the water, but how actually they prepare. So one of the things that was always interest to me, again, between 2005 and 2008, how did these Olympic athletes prepare for their swim? What kind of dry land training did they do? What kind of visualization did they do? What was their nutritional plan? What is the optimal time to drink or eat something in a race versus a channel swim versus a solo swim? And all of this stuff was just a collective global experimentation on what is optimal. Right. And learning from everybody is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. I love it myself. And you've been very helpful to me. I don't know if you remember talking to me a couple of years ago about I don't, one of the comments you made was like how a person can't possibly swim, like a person like Sarah Thomas who goes out and does 80, 100 miles. Like, she can't swim 80 or 100 miles to train for that, and so you have to do the best you can, and then you go out there the day of the event. And that's been a big kind of mantra of mine, and I've tested it in various ways. But getting back to you, what motivates you to keep going?
Again, this sense of adventure, this sense of pushing one's envelope. One of the things that I find fascinating, certainly in the last 10 years, is ice swimming. Again, Lynn Cox lives in just a few miles down the road from me. And she really opened up everybody's eyes as to what is possible with her Bering Strait swim, with her swims in Antarctica, about swimming in water under 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And at the time, it was so mind-boggling. But now we have hundreds of people around the world doing ice miles and ice swimming. And you look in medical journals and it says, if you're in water at 38 degrees, you have 20 minutes to live, or whatever the documentation says. But humans are now pushing that envelope further and further. People like Sarah Thomas is, no way. I knew Phil Brush, and I've known Phil Brush since he was a teenager. When he did his 28-hour, 3-way crossing the channel, that was like mind-boggling. And now Sarah's put it to 4 with the possibility of going, a 5-way. And so allowing the human mind to imagine what is possible makes the physical possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when that's why I liked racing so much. I said, God, how can Paul Asmuth swim so fast? How can John Kinsella swim so fast? Well, they swim so fast because they doing that in their daily workout.
Mm.
What do they? How do they prepare themselves for every single workout? And learning what drives them daily helps me or motivates me to do whatever I would like to do. So learning all these things behind the scenes, like, is really a driving force for me. And I'm always learning from ice swimmers. I mean, now, Otto Fanning, the South African cardiologist, you know, he's now in his mid 70s and he's still thinking about an English Channel swim. So before, when I was growing up, Doc Councilman was 56, 58 years old, blowing everybody's mind because an old man can swim across the English Channel. And now someone approaching the age of 80 has a legitimate, reasonable shot of swimming the English Channel. That's just unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's fantastic. I love it, like you were saying, and I think that's a big kind of we won't say distinguishing factor, but open water swimmers. I just love the longevity of it. Like it's just amazing to see people coming back again and again and again and again. We just can't stay away from the open water. Tell us about 2016. Tell us about the heart attack.
Okay. So I was doing my company, Katsu, were in the early stages of our product development, and I had visited Japan 3 times in 11 days, flying economy class. And it was basically, I worked 11 days straight with very little sleep, extreme sleep. I flew from LAX to Tokyo. I'd work and come back, and we were really trying to figure out how to make this machine. And I just pushed my body way too hard. What I did is, on the last flight, I knew my body was hurting, and my body just ached all over the place. And in the airplane, my peripheral vision started to narrow significantly. I mean, I couldn't see the sides. I had to turn my head to look, and everything hurt, just fatigue. And I got off the airplane, and my wife picked me up, and she says, "Oh, you look really tired." I said, I'm exhausted. So we went home. That next morning, I missed morning workout. Like, I never miss morning workout. In whatever 40 some odd years of being able to swim in the morning, I've probably missed fewer than 10 times total for anything, sickness, whatever. And that morning I missed. My wife thought that was rather unusual, even though she knew I was tired, but she let me sleep. I came downstairs, and I just hit the floor. What happened was I had a rupture, or I had my artery became inflamed, and it just closed up. So it was very similar to if you have a lot of plaque, the artery closed up. My heart stopped. My, at the time, 17-year-old son started to give me CPR, and ambulance came. They took me to the hospital. At the time, on that particular day, my cardiologist told me later that I was the 4th man in their mid 50s who had come in within an hour's time.
Wow.
3 of them didn't make it, unfortunately. And for whatever reason, I did. And they put a stent in my artery. They put me in, they call it the Arctic Sun Protocol, which they make they freeze the body. Basically, they freeze the body in order to stop any further damage to the heart. They cooled me down for 3 days, and then they slowly warmed me up. And it was the 8th day that I woke up. So by the time I hit the floor to when I woke up, a week had passed. And when I woke up, I was in the hospital and I saw my mother and my wife at the bed, and I opened my eyes and I realized that I was in a hospital. My first thought was, oh my God, I hope it's not my dad. And because I saw my mom and my wife in the hospital, and I knew it was a hospital room, but I couldn't imagine that I was the patient. So my immediate thought was, oh, my dad, what happened to him? And then my second thought was, I have to go to the bathroom. So I started to get up, and my wife and my mother like told me, like, don't move. And then I said, I need to go to the bathroom, as clear as day. I need to go to the bathroom. They said, no, you can't. You had a heart attack. And it didn't register. And then I was going to get up, and I realized I had all these tubes in my arm and in my nose and everywhere. And I said, that's really strange. And then the nurse comes in, and again, I was really confused. And the nurse came in, and she said, "Oh, we just called the doctor, because the doctor had just told my wife, whatever 8 days previously, that I would have severe neurological damage if I did live." He said I was lucky that they were able to get the stent in time, but because I had spent so much time without breathing naturally, that it was probably severe neurological damage, and that she should expect me to not be normal. And so when I did wake up, and I was talking normally, obviously everybody was pretty happy and surprised, and so was I. In both cases, I was both happy and surprised. And then I woke up, and doctor came, he explained to me what happened, and then I was actually very pissed off at myself. And I said, yeah, I got a second chance. So I need to I vowed then I need to make every single day worth it, and make up for any lost time. So that's what I've been trying to do ever since.
Yeah. How have you made any changes to your
Uh,
life?
well, one of the thing, the cardiologist, I visited Stanford, I visited Harvard, I visited Cedars-Sinai here in Los Angeles, and I had to figure out why I had this heart attack. And the conclusion, after all these learned heart doctors talked to me, was basically a lack of sleep. And a lack of sleep is this sort of low grade stress, and stress creates inflammation in the same way that plaque creates stress. And so that artery was just closing up largely because of stress. And the biggest change in my life was sleeping more. I still can't sleep for long periods, but I figured out a way that I could take a nap, even if it's 5-minute nap in the middle of the day. That would help. Interesting enough, again, because I've been swimming all my life, I'm actually swimming significantly faster now than I was in my late 20s, 30s, 40s. I think because I'm sleeping a little bit more, but also I'm just happy to be alive. So it turned out okay.
Tell us about your recovery, though. You used the product that
Yes.
yeah. Do you want to tell us
So
a little bit about it?
yeah. So before I had made this product, I'd spent 10 years working with cardiologists in Japan about this thing called Katsu. And we actually studied 7,000 cardiac rehab patients in a hospital setting, doing this technology. And it was all done in a hospital, under the care of cardiologist and exercise physiologist and internist. And we did blood tests and MRI and ultrasound, and we had all the best equipment available. And then here I come, 7 years later, and had my own heart attack. And so I told the doctors, I said, I'd like to experiment on myself. Again, this sense of adventure. And they said, well, you should talk to your cardiologist about it. So I did. And he said, no, you can't do that. That's dangerous. And I said, well, I don't think so. So I basically just self-experimented on myself. And I, spoke with a lot of physicians, a lot of vascular surgeons, et cetera, and figured out, hey, this is actually pretty cool. So since that time, I think we've sort of pushed the envelope of what is possible with someone undergoing cardiac rehabilitation.
That's really cool. Are there benefits for the average swimmer from
Oh,
Katsu product? Yeah.
absolutely. So we did a test with special operators. So special operators are like your Navy SEALs, your Army Rangers, special forces, and those men are in extreme shape. They train all day long. They're strong. They have very good stamina, and I was able to convince them to do a 3-week test where these guys don't train so hard. All they do is walk comfortably with the Katsu bands on. And they did for 3 weeks. And it was my contention, based on my own experimentation, that when you increase the elasticity of your capillaries and veins, you actually enable the body to become more stronger vascularly, which in the case of a swimmer, rower, runner, et cetera, means that you have a greater probability of going at a faster pace for a longer period of time. That was my thesis. That's what I'd seen in myself. And that's what I had told our military services. And they proved it to be the case. So these guys walk for 3 weeks with these bands on, 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week. And at the end of that 3-week period, again, these are all people in their 20s, extremely fit. Not only did they increase their maximum, the VO2 max, they also increased their 1.5 mile run time. Wow. And so when you can increase the elasticity of your capillaries and veins, it does a variety of very profound things in your body.
Yeah. Yep. That sounds really cool. I'm intrigued. So you're back to swimming. That was part of your recovery, right? Getting
Yes,
back to swimming.
that was the extent of my recovery. The hospital that I was at, Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach, they had your typical cardiac rehab stuff, so treadmill, elliptical bike, etc. And I was telling the nurse and complained to the cardiologist. I said, "You don't understand. I'm getting out of shape doing your cardiac rehab." And I showed them data from myself. I would do my own. And I said, "Look, this is my heart rate, my respiratory rate." I would explain to them that your means of getting people back into shape is based on the premise that people are not in shape.
Right.
So
right.
When you have a cardiac rehab patient who already is in shape, how do you help them? And that's what I was exploring. Mm-hmm. And so again, I always I'm just curious about many things. So
yeah.
That's one of them.
That's my thesis about, or my hypothesis about marathon swimmers. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm crazy," or "I did this crazy thing," and I'm like, "No, we're not. We're just curious."
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing your story today, Stephen. I did want to save a couple minutes at the end. I like to do this little breakout rooms. If you're willing to stick around for your last 5 minutes and talk to whomever you end up in a breakout room with. Thank you also for everything that you do for open water swimming. It's just amazing, but be sure you get some sleep. I hope you enjoyed today's interview. Do you want to take marathon swim stories with you? Subscribe on your favorite podcast provider. Want to connect with like-minded limit pushers? Join us for Marathon Swim Stories live on Tuesdays at 5:30 a.m. Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, 13:30 GMT. Thanks for watching.